Welcome back to the Heart and Science of Creative Leadership podcast. My name is Bill Coletti, and as always, joined by my amazing friend, more importantly, and co-host Aarti Shah. Aarti, how are you doing?
I am doing well. I'm ready for it to be summer, and I don't know when this is going to post, Bill. So apologies if it's like, Christmas season, but I am just ready for those long days and it's the slower pace.
So I just got the text message from, so I'm in Austin, Texas, and you're out in the Bay Area in California. I just got a text message that we are in a heat dome and expect a high of 105 today. So come join my summer anytime you want to, as we record this in the middle of May.
Well, I wore a heavy coat this morning because it's the Bay Area and it was windy and cold. So, different worlds.
Cry me a river. Cry me a river. Well, good. Well, this is going to be a great episode. It's just Aarti and I sort of reflecting on the number of episodes that we've done. We've identified a handful of themes that we want to talk about and give some perspective on and really just kind of reflect and reminisce. Before we get started, let's go ahead and do our heartbeats and science experiment, excuse me. Aarti, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with your heartbeat?
So my heartbeat is media. I started my career in media. I love media. I love how much media has evolved to involve things like podcasts, like Bill and I do here. But media is no longer my day job. As many of you know, I work with agencies on marketing, on positioning, on operational initiatives. And I have finally hit my bandwidth where trying to do a podcast and trying to keep my day job and trying to do all of these other things that I love to do in my life outside of work was getting to be too much. So my heartbeat Bill knows this already, mostly for listeners, is that I'm going to step back from the podcast. I will continue on as an executive producer, so I will have Bill's ear still. And I plan to join podcasts occasionally to come in and we can reflect on what Bill's been talking about with his guests, because Bill, you will soldier on.
I will. And so my heartbeat is a reflection of that. My heartbeat is obviously, it goes without saying, my fondness of you and fondness of working together. We sort of made this happen out of an informal meetup conversation that turned into a nice podcast that we've been doing for a couple of years now. So it's been kind of exciting on that. And so my heartbeat is excited about what's next, but obviously a little bit of sadness of just the day-to-day interaction that we've had, but excited for you on the bandwidth and excited for you as you grow in your business. And we love talking to owners, and you're an owner and you're growing your business and you're expanding the things that you're doing. And I just think that's super, super exciting. So you will be an executive producer. You will have my ear. You will continue to give me grounded, good advice as we move forward, as you always have. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yes. And I want to reflect that back to you, Bill. We kind of met by chance and it's blossomed into a great professional relationship, but also a great friendship.
Absolutely.
Bill and I, we see each other in person and we don't talk about podcasting. We talk about life.
And got our spouses together, by the way, last time.
We got our spouses together. We did this last time in Austin. As folks may know, I am a Texan. I live in California, but I identify as a Texan. I get to still see you often. That's
Absolutely.
Always,
we'll continue that.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm excited for this chapter for you, Bill. I think that you have such a passion for this. I think you're a very natural podcaster, a very natural interviewer. You really know how to pull out good stories from people. So I'm excited to sort of watch you grow into this role as well.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm excited about it. Sad to see you go, but you're not going very far. So I'm looking forward to that. What's on your mind from a science experiment standpoint?
I mean, I can't help but to think about the fact that we are all, whether we like it or not, in an experiment to hold on to our democracy in this moment. I don't think anyone listening here is going to be shy. At least you're not going to know my political views on what's happening right now. I will say, as I mentioned, I consider myself a Texan, and I feel invested emotionally in Texas politics. I grew up in a very different Texas than it is today. My governor was Ann Richards. It was George W. Bush. We took for granted that we would switch between Democrats and Republicans. It was a very purple state. My senators were Lloyd Bentsen and Kay Bailey Hutchinson. And I sort of took for granted that this was a purple state. We were a reasonable state that would sort of, toggle between red and blue. That is not where it is today. What I would like to see in my lifetime is it to go back to that. But I'm not going to move back to Texas, or not anytime soon. So I've been trying to be involved in Texas politics from afar. And that's been my experiment. And, there were some school board elections that I was watching very closely. I tried to kind of see what I could do from being abroad. I was watching town hall meetings. I was trying to inform people that I knew in this state on, giving them my perspective. and the two candidates that I was rooting for just won. So that felt really good. And it was felt gratifying that, maybe we can rethink how we do political movements in this country because we are so spread out. And just because, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, Bill, maybe I'm doing more harm right now. I was talking about a Californian impacting Texas politics.
No, I think it is truly in the spirit of this section. It's an experiment. Can you do it remotely? And then the other side of it that I know we've chatted about is, can you do it without just getting sucked into the muck?
Yeah.
And that's an experiment in its own right.
Well, because Bill, you're a former Politico yourself.
Former Republican and conservative, and it ain't me anymore at all.
Mm-hmm. Do you still, are you still involved in politics at all?
Not really. An observer. I think I took a look at it at the end of last year. I think like the last candidate or representative that I worked with has termed out or gone out. Right. Mm-hmm. So I don't know anybody. And that was mostly Southern congressmen or Florida, House and Senate. Yeah. I don't think there's anybody. I mean, there may be somebody that's like a mayor now or something, but I most everybody I've worked with and know has kind of gone on and do other things, Marco Rubio notwithstanding. But yeah, no, I'm really not.
Because you're a Florida guy. You're a Florida politics guy, not a Texas guy.
No,
that's right.
No. Yeah. And Florida's just as odd as the other two big states we've mentioned.
Yep. What's your experiment, Bill?
So my science experiment is not as highbrow as yours, but I think very important. I am on a daily challenge. We'll see if it works out daily. I'm on a daily challenge to un-algorithm and un-chat GPT my LinkedIn content. And I'm just going to write a couple words or 100 words, whatever it is, but just go into the app and peck something out in the post section, not do long form lead magnets, CTA, woozy what's it that are chat generated. But I'm just going to write. And I wrote recently, about two things that are really important to me. And I've got a third one about death. I mean, I had an agency owner that I'm incredibly fond of pass away. And so I'm going to write about the realities of those types of things as an agency owner. I talked about writing on LinkedIn. Does it matter? Does anybody care? I got some wonderful feedback. So my experiment is to write just to write things that are on my mind and, outputs from the podcast, output from my conversation with owners and just things that come out of coaching sessions and just share some reflections and observations very personally. And then one I just wrote recently was about my personal transition from being a consultant on the road to doing something much more gratifying, which is the coaching and the podcast.
I welcome this with open arms, Bill. I think I speak for many when we say that we are tired. And the reason that LinkedIn is so, let's say, cringeworthy is, or cringy, I guess is how the young people say it these days, is because all of that slop, all of that AI slop that all sounds the same. And you're right. And they all sort of have the same sort of CTAs and emojis
you can tell they're all with bolts and bullets.
Bullets, yeah, with the little emojis, and they're all sort of being measured by the same KPIs. I think LinkedIn is due for a refreshing sense of authenticity. And this is why people are gravitating to places like TikTok, right? I mean, people are just turning on their phone cameras and
doing something cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And it feels like a real connection even, and so I am so excited for this, Bill. I know I've already engaged with some of your posts using this.
It's been very kind, by the way.
Yeah, but I love it. And I could tell right away. I was like, this sounds like Bill.
Even without me announcing it.
Yeah. No, it drew me in because it sounded like you. And I was like, not to say that you're using AI before, or maybe you were.
I was, absolutely.
You were.
Absolutely.
And it didn't sound like you. I was like, this Bill wrote this. And so I could hear your voice in it.
And I noticed an error on there and there when I wrote it, just pecking it on my sofa. And so I may just leave that kind of stuff in there because that's pretty real to do there. Maybe I should improve my grammar, know the difference.
I think that you are on the cutting edge of what we will start to see on LinkedIn is much more like content that sort of is coming from a much more human place. And I don't know if you've been following this trend about these sort of algorithm cleanses where people are realizing that their entire personalities, all of their preferences are now being shaped by algorithms. And they're, that surprise that finding things that you love in unexpected places is it's been lost.
Yeah.
So people are disconnecting and they're just saying, I'm just going to go to the video store or whatever the equivalent of that is. You can actually go to Barnes and Nobles today. They have a really great video selection and just pick out something that looks interesting or go to the vinyl store to pick out music versus having everything fed to you.
Yeah. And I did it just as a while back ago when I was on, so I'm still continuing my Spanish learning journey. I created an alternative channel or alternative profile, on YouTube. So I've got my main one where it's got the things that I watch primarily on YouTube, but it's a different one just on Spanish. And then I just did another one and didn't put anything in it just to get things about model airplanes, which I have no interest in, things about, I saw something about breastfeeding, for gosh sake. So you just get all this kind of crazy stuff, which is super. It's nice to not just get the 5, 6, 7 things you're really interested in. I like those things, but there's other things I'd like to like.
Right.
Well.
And yeah, we know we need our personalities. We need to be shaped by more than just, these algorithms. So I think there's going to be some backlash to how digitized our lives have become. So
and it's just going to get homogenized and it's all going to be, white milk with a little bit of extra sauce in there. So as we said, we want to talk about these 5 themes. And that's a nice segue into one that I want to talk about. And so we went back and looked and used ChatGPT. We took some transcripts from all of our episodes and just sort of identified what are some common themes. And one of them, Aarti, that came up was this notion of the role in structure and fostering creativity. And I think that's a segue because I think people are using ChatGPT as a structure to foster and make creative things. And I think we're seeing technology impacting account executives and the function and the role that they play and things that they do. And so I'd love to get your thoughts, and I'll share some of mine about, is structure, which some people think is a straitjacket, do you think in agency life that structure actually supports and fosters creativity?
So I'm going to come at this from a slightly biased perspective, is that, number one, I feel like there's actually data that backs this up, right? That the number one driver of creativity in an organization is psychological safety, right? So if you truly want your teams to feel like they can be bold with their creativity, take some chances, do something innovative, I think you, as an owner, you have to make sure that psychological safety is prioritized. And everybody will say that, oh, of course we do that. But I really would challenge owners to really think about what the protocols are in place to make sure that there's space for people to have that sense of safety. There's a lot of data on this. I think Harvard Business Review has done quite a bit on this. So if I'm not going to be the expert on it, but I know from my own personal experience how important that is. And times when I felt psychologically safe, and times that I haven't, and how much that impacted my overall creativity. What I will say is that most creative people feel it's very easy to for them to feel a little stifled by too much structure. And I don't mean just creative, like artistic types, right? I think anytime you're trying to create something, I'm using that word broadly, you always hear everyone say, oh, I have my best idea when I was walking in the park or when I was on vacation. Like when you try to put people into a conference room with a whiteboard,
go be creative.
You don't usually yield your best ideas. That's why people roll their eyes every time they get invited to a brainstorming session. That's just not how most people generate ideas. So I would just challenge owners to make sure that you're creating worlds in which your teams will have the ability to sort of step back. I mean, even if it's, if you're hybrid or if you work, remote, encourage people to go take walks. I know one agency, they would actually have people like they'd have ideas like take a walk in Central Park, go to this coffee shop, or, just places that they wanted people to get out and just kind of get exposed to different ideas.
Right. So let's take that. I love that structure. And the way I think about this is in the context of freedom to versus freedom from. And so let's take this agency in New York that has these 5 ideas for a great brainstorm. Go get a cup of coffee, go for a walk, we'll get a massage, whatever's on that list. That's structure. That is a structure, because picking that activity with the expectation that it's not to run an errand.
Right.
It's the freedom to do something. It's the freedom to be creative. And it's also the freedom from distraction. It's the freedom from running your errands or doing the things that you need to do. So I like this juxtaposition that I think that structure, just as we've just defined it, actually does foster creativity. And that it is not just this blank slate. I know I'm better when someone brings me some ideas, some bullets that I can then expand on. Sending me to the mountaintop with a blank sheet of paper yields a pretty poor outcome. And so the structure of a template is actually very, very, very helpful for me to actually do that.
Yeah. And I think, and that's also, owners should get to know their staff, right? And know that there's not, there are some people that actually thrive on sort of the blank canvas. I know creative types at agencies that they don't want direction. They want to go off to their mountaintop and do their thing. I, like you, would rather have some sort of like template as well.
A brief.
Yeah, exactly. And I think knowing your teams and knowing that there's not
Yes.
going to be a one size fits all, but also like you said, I mean, structure, I think people think about that as like 9 to 5 in the
Rigid, a
office,
form you have to fill
right.
out that proves your brainstorm. No, I just think there should be it's the freedom from distraction is what I think it is. Yeah, that's cool. So good theme around the structure of fostering creativity. Next theme that came up is this idea of balancing personal values with business growth. And this is one that you and I've talked about on the podcast before. We've talked about offline as well. And let me frame what I think what the theme is. It's this notion in its simplest form: as an agency owner, are you pursuing performance of your agency, or are you pursuing lifestyle? And so we've seen lifestyle firms, and then we've seen high performance firms. And so how do you balance this sort of personal value that I have advocated for a lifestyle firm? How do you balance that with the need to make payroll and cover your bills and grow and pay yourself a little bit more every year? How do you balance that? And what have you learned about that balance?
So what I'm going to first say is when you grow for its own sake, you end up with, and this is a term that I've learned recently that's being thrown around a lot, called enshittification, right? So
Say again, say the word again.
Enshittification.
Enshittification.
And shit, like SHIT.
Okay,
Apologies for any kids listening. And it's actually a term that some of the agencies I work with have been using that to talk a little bit about what's happening in the world right now.
Yeah.
It's really right. It's when you stop putting clients or even your employees at the center of your decisions, and it really ends up being shareholders or just sort of keeping that profit, margins ticking up year over year, right? At some point, you're going to degrade the product that you're offering. And I think we've seen that, for instance, with like social media platforms is always a center of example. Do we remember Facebook from 2007? How much joy we all got on going onto Facebook in 2007? How much joy do people derive from going on Facebook today, right? It's sort of this idea of enshittification. And what I would caution, well, I think growth is great. I think you can't be stagnant. I think you can strike that balance. But if you have like 3 to 5 years of like exponential growth, say you're writing a boom, you absolutely have to be willing to have that number not be as impressive and take a reset and step back. Did you overhire? Did you hire the right people?
Yeah.
Are you, what kind of churn are you seeing both for employees and clients? That's what I would say. I would say I'm not opposed to growth. In fact, I think that if you don't grow, that can be quite dangerous for your business in the long term.
Yep.
But I think you have to be much more intentional about it. And if you start to feel like enshittification is happening to your business, you have to be mindful of that, because at some point, we've seen this with some of the big agencies that have so much pressure to do nothing but grow. And if you talk to their clients, they will talk about this, how much their service was degraded from the day that they signed that contract, right, to 5 years in. So that's my take on this.
Yeah. Do you think folks need to be intentional and articulate it overtly? And I don't mean put it on your website, but say it out loud, that we are building this agency for growth versus we are building this agency for lifestyle? Does it need to be articulated?
No, because nobody will admit to being a lifestyle agency. Nobody. There is stigma attached to that. There's this idea that you aren't serious about your clients, and that you're not serious about your employees.
But I think Josh Reynolds did on our call when we interviewed Josh. I think he talked about.
Yes, but Josh mostly employs his family members, right? So they.
They're all in it together,
from it, right? But when I've spoken to Scott Allison about this, and he's like, you can't. At some point, your employees will hear that, and they will hear that there's no room for me to grow, right?
Yeah.
And then you lose your employees, you start losing your clients. So there is risk in calling it a lifestyle agency. We are a society that values growth. So it's hard to not position your agency as one that's looking to grow. I think the danger is you don't want to be seen as stagnant. So
I probably agree with that. I think it has to do with the talent and the people that you have. I think there are some firms that I've heard that maybe they don't say it the way I'm articulating, the way I'm suggesting, but I do think they're like, we're just plodders, we're pluggers, and everybody's making money. We've got second houses, or kids are going to school, or we're doing the things we need to do, and we're just going to stick with it. And that's okay. And we don't need to grow. We don't need to scale. Don't need open up an office in San Diego.
Yeah. And I think that, and you're going to attract talent that also are looking for that, right? That they want
They're not necessarily bad.
They're not bad, right? They're not looking necessarily to climb the ladder in the same way. They're looking for stability. They're looking somewhere where they can like their coworkers, like their clients.
Absolutely.
And I've seen agencies that have taken that model and they have built really strong, teams around, they've really strong businesses around that. Usually at some point though, and Bill, I want to hear your perspective, the owner starts thinking about their exit. And once they start thinking about their exit, things inevitably change, right? They either bring in new leadership who can be successors, they bring in outside investment, they start looking for a buyer, so then they have to change how they operate their businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that it almost feels inevitable even with the agencies that are built to be a lifestyle firm.
Yeah. That inflection point, that owner exit inflection point in whatever form or fashion, just when they're not there 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, whatever that alternative looks like, is a huge moment. And I got a couple of clients that are dealing with that. And it can be done. The best way I've seen it work is for the owner to do it with grace and transparency. And by what I mean is grace is that I'm going to intentionally step away to give this other team an opportunity. I'm not going far, but I'm going to step away. Transparency is bring that new person in, whether it's outside, inside, from within, but show them and be really honest about what you're thinking, about what you're feeling. I don't like the way you did that. This isn't how I did it in the past. And be okay and have the safety to be able to say those things. So do it with grace, give them the space, but also give them the clarity and transparency of kind of what you're thinking in order to make that exit. And that's more of maybe a 10 to 15 person agency, not outside money, the way you're sort of thinking about it. But I think that if you do those two things and then grounded in all of that is that the owner, the exiter, has to be clear with their second mountain. What the hell are they going to do? And that's where I think it gets troublesome. I'm working with somebody right now that's saying all the right things, but doing all the wrong things because they don't know what they're going to do. And I'm not sure really they like hanging out with their partner. And so I'm not really sure what they're doing next. They're not really sure what they're doing next.
Do they have to know that, do you think?
I think it helps. It helps. I know what I'm going to do next Wednesday, and it helps me get up on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I do think it helps to know, are we going to travel? Are we going to write a book? Are we going to teach? So yeah, are we going to go work at Habitat for Humanity? So yeah, I do think it's important. Now, there could be a room for self-discovery, but even that's a destination in and of itself. But just stopping is very scary. Very scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So that fits into the next theme around navigating difficult conversations and decisions. And I think this really comes up in the context of layoffs, downsizing, changing your head count is sort of a big way. We talked about it in firing and letting people go. So what have you learned, or what's your take on this notion of difficult conversations? And I think for the most part, that's vis-a-vis staff reductions and difficult decisions.
Right. I mean, simply, this is a small industry. It is a smaller world than I think a lot of owners appreciate. And don't burn bridges. And right now we are talking about layoffs, right? That's the current business climate we're in. But in boom times, it can be staff leaving, right? I've heard horror stories of like owners like throwing chairs and just like really just having temper tantrums when somebody goes in to give notice, especially in those times when talent is really tight. And these people don't forget it. And they may go to another agency tomorrow, but 5 years from now, you see their name on the RFP because they're looking to hire an agency. And don't think that they are going to forget. It doesn't matter how sweet, you can send them flowers, you can take them out to lunch. They will not forget how you behaved the moment that you told them that you put in your notice. And stories get around. Like, I have so many stories of agency owners behaving very, very poorly. You don't own these people. Like, they have a right to pursue their own careers, and you shouldn't take it personally when they leave. And then same thing with layoffs, though. Like, don't badmouth people when they leave. Don't wink, wink, nudge, nudge. They weren't really important, because again, I have seen agencies lay people off. Those people end up client side, and suddenly their tune changes. I think people don't appreciate what a small world our industry is. Everybody seems to know everybody. Everybody's a few degrees removed. So just keep that in mind when you're having these difficult conversations. Really put humanity first. Treat people like people, and it will pay off in the long run. I promise.
Love the way you were saying it. And what's coming to me is this phrase of the way you fire will determine who you hire.
How I love that.
And so I think that I would use all the words you just used, do it with grace. But the other thing from the owner's perspective is don't be afraid to fire. And maybe not in an economic context of layoffs, maybe different than just firing people. What I've experienced and really worked to get over is this notion that when I have to fire someone, it is a reflection on me and my ego and my failing. And it's not. I onboard really well. I explain and cast vision really well. And if they don't get it and they don't understand it, that's not on me. I didn't make a mistake. And for everybody's sake, do it with grace, but move on quickly. this lingering around is not good. So that's the other thing, is get your ego out of it. But that doesn't mean be compassionate the way Aarti just described it. I think that's critical. But I think that you can move swiftly, because the way you fire will determine on who you hire. And I think that is something for us all to keep in mind. And tough decisions are tough. And then my other 2 cents on that is, find a friend or find someone that's been there before you and get some advice. And they're probably
Yeah.
going to say, pull your belt a little bit tighter and just get it done. I mean, that's just,
Yeah.
there's no lingering around. Yeah.
I think you're right. I think that lingering can be really toxic for the whole. I mean,
Totally.
not just for the, it really.
But this client loves that person. We can't let them go, and this and that. But
Yes.
they
Yeah.
shit all over everybody at the Christmas party. So why are
Yeah.
they? Yeah, we can't do that. You gotta, and
It
that's
once
ego.
one
I'm
it's
going to fix them.
ego.
I'm going to fix them.
Once you take the Band-Aid off, like it really, I've never heard of an agency leader regretting that decision.
No.
Once, especially if it's someone that they knew was a problem.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. So fourth one, and then I want to get to technology at the end, is building and sustaining company culture. Directly relates to difficult conversations, hiring, firing. Culture, that word, while I did not do the research, is probably a word that's come up more often than just about any other word in some of the conversations that we've had, is culture. What is your take on building and sustaining culture?
So, two things. Well, first of all, I think owners need to decide how they're defining culture, right? Is culture, and I want to borrow from something that you said about, freedom from, freedom to, right? Culture is not just what you do together as an agency. Oh, we go on retreats once a quarter, or we have happy hours once a month, or whatever it might be, right?
Mm-hmm.
I once had an agency CEO tell me something along the lines of, our culture is that our employees have dinner with their families whenever possible. And they built around a culture around this idea that our norm, not to say that there's not exceptions, we are in professional services, but the norm is that you would go home and have dinner with your families.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was such a great way to think about culture. It's like, what do your employees have the freedom to do as part of your culture? If you're keeping them tied to their laptops until 8 p.m. at night, it doesn't matter how many happy hours you throw at them, how many pet parades you do, or whatever it is.
Ping pong tables or beer in the cooler.
Yeah. And also just think about culture as more than just perks, right? It was former head of, I don't know if he was head, but he was one of the comms people at Google, Gabriel Stricker, just really, really smart guy, adore him. He once said that, when he was at Google, people would come to him and say, oh, how do we recreate this culture? We've been trying, we have bean bags and we have free snacks. And Gabriel looked at them and he said, does your CEO make themselves available every Friday afternoon for Ask Me Anything? And they would well, no, they couldn't possibly do that. That would, right. Well, it's that was at the core of what made Google's culture so unique in those days, right? Those Friday afternoons, right? They would show up and that you could really ask them anything about the business.
Yeah.
So I challenged people. When I was doing best places to work on the trade side, I'd ask people about culture and they would name, oh, we have free snacks, we have happy hours. And how are you showing up as a leader? And how do you engage with your staff, with your employees?
Yeah.
How do they see you engage with clients?
I hear you saying that. Curious your reaction to this. You can't buy culture. You have to earn it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're saying. So we bought a new IPA. So therefore we've got better culture. And I don't think it works that way. I think you have to earn it, but the CEO showing up and we had, Tracy Williams on, I think it was early on and talking about these 5 things. And it's the way we run our business. And we ask ourselves these questions. That's culture. And they earned it over time, and they're not pro forma. They're real. And they're real in the way she made decisions. So last theme that came up, not as much as culture, but certainly rising in the past year or so, is embracing innovation and change. And I think that's really AI is kind of what that fundamentally becomes. And so to fast forward us a little bit, I've heard recently about AI first agencies that are AI first, which I guess that means they're AI only. Talk a little bit about what you see in this notion of embracing technology and embracing innovation and change. But I think the one barbarian at the door that we all need to be conscious of is AI. Just love to get your reflections on that.
Yeah, I mean, so I would zoom out first and say, if you're going to truly embrace change and innovation, is don't expect immediate returns, right? We saw this happen when social media completely upended the industry, and we saw the agencies, especially the non-publicly traded agencies, Edelman in particular. Richard, I remember, came out and said, this is going to change everything. I'm going to make massive investments in this. And he's like, and that's going to my profitability is going to go down, but I think in the long run it'll pay off. And there was a time period where Edelman was it was just undisputed leader in digital engagement.
Mm-hmm.
They were leaps and bounds above everybody else. Everyone else caught up eventually, but they were willing to make that investment without becoming too attached to the return. But on the flip, also like to the point about AI is I wouldn't become so attached to any one particular like technology or in how it's going to be applied, because we don't, especially when that's still evolving. I mean, do you remember when we were all going to live in the metaverse, right? And everyone, or like Second Life, right? And then there were entire agencies that just and this is when you call yourself a social media agency, as people were doing in 2007, 2008, or an AI agency. I mean, yeah, you can get some short-term return on it, but in the long run, everyone's going to incorporate the technology in similar ways. Yeah. And that's not going to be a differentiating point anymore. And so I would be careful about just sort of tying your entire business proposition to a single platform, and really just think about how you're incorporating that to make your output better versus like making that your whole identity.
Yeah. No, I love it. I mean, it's so this notion of embracing it. Most everybody we talk to says they embrace change and embrace technology. You have to, just to keep up. I don't know if you have to go all in. And I think that's your point on one or the other. I think the Edelman example is a great example, and that digital transformation, and maybe AI is of that caliber of a transformation. But I still think, particularly for my public affairs folks, I think there's value in wisdom. And that is not technically innovative. That is just lived experiences that people share and say, Governor, I'm not sure I'd do that. And so I am a fan of it. I think it's great. I'd certainly leverage it myself. I see some agency owners that are going all in. And I also see some that are like, okay, this will help me get better. But at the end of the day, it's about my wisdom. And so you got to embrace it, but I don't think you don't need to upset the apple cart. So I think the Edelman example is you can see both sides of that example.
And I will say, agency owners, if you're listening to this, I don't know if you read the New York Magazine article about college students are basically ChatGPTing their way through college. That's a real liability for when you hire these folks, right? They're going to at some point be alone with a client, and they're not going to have ChatGPT in front of them telling them how to respond to a question. By alone with a client, I mean alone meaning not having their laptop right in front of them, right? Or they're going to be asked to write something up maybe on the fly, and maybe the client's right there with them. I mean, there's just so many scenarios in which they have to have built that muscle on how to be able to communicate without relying on ChatGPT. So when you're hiring, I would just, hopefully we can have some influence here. We can make our hiring practice so that these students cannot get away with just ChatGPTing their way through college. Have them, do an oral, maybe put more emphasis on that oral communication.
Shoot a video. I've been a big fan of video. If you can't, but in the interview process, send me a video, a 5-minute video with your thoughts on whatever.
Yeah.
And even that can be hacked, by the way. You can still write a script and look at it up on the screen.
Totally. But I mean, that's why that back and forth, right? Yeah. Are they able to think on their feet and respond quickly? Yeah. And you can have like the conversation you and I are having right now, right? It would be impossible for us to keep up this cadence if one of us kept, putting our responses into ChatGPT. So, of course, being savvy about AI, being savvy about technology is so important. But to your point, Bill, like there are some core skills that will continue to be required, and we just can't outsource all of those. Not yet, anyway. No. So hopefully, we can put some pressure on young people and make them realize that they need to keep. Yeah.
I'm just real curious how this email thing's going to go. We haven't really bought into it yet, but I'm just curious how email is going to change the business.
Right. But it's like, I know. But at the same time, right. I mean, and we've all moved on from email now, totally. Right? I mean, most of our interactions are Slack or like, that kind of
WhatsApp, or I'm chatting on my phone more than I feel guilty that I'm sitting messing with my phone, but I'm actually doing the same work that I would have done at a desktop.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So, we're obviously at this inflection point of our business in terms of technology, in terms of AI, and in terms of this, like, this next generation of PR professionals. I was actually just talking to Kim Sample, president of the PR Council, wonderful woman. And she was, again, pushing for liberal arts education. Yeah. That like really, I mean, and I will say that, and when I was talking to her, I realized that most of the college courses that have stuck with me that I think about to this day are the liberal arts courses. Everything that I learned in like business school or journalism school.
You mean like humanities and philosophy and things like that?
Humanities, philosophy, or courses that were taught that way. Because everything else I honestly learned on the job. You learn in your first internship. You learn in your first year working. But how I think and how I approach problems.
Totally. Amen. Totally
Yeah, I
true.
learned. Yeah. So just again, don't overlook resumes with liberal arts and just gravitate right towards those folks who went to through PR programs.
Yeah. And probably don't hire those people. Hire people with
Yeah.
more with diverse
I mean, that's
backgrounds.
the argument is that like, are we adequately preparing this next generation of PR professionals with these PR degrees? I agree with you, Bill. So anyway, yes,
Yeah. Well, that's good.
lots
Well, those
to
are
chew on.
5 themes that came up in our podcast. And so it's exciting to have these conversations, Aarti. Always valuable to have this. You will be back and we will do this more. We will do this more in the future.
Yes.
Best of luck on everything that you're doing. And this is awesome.
Yes, and best of luck to you, Bill. And at least, we all, I get to follow along on your adventures. I get to look out for your raw LinkedIn posts as
Absolutely.
well.
I'm going to try to write one this afternoon. Yeah, I think it'll be
Yes.
good. And keep an eye on the podcast. And I may ask you to help me invite some cool owners.
Yes, of course.
All right. Thanks, everybody,
Thanks,
for
everyone.
joining us on the Heart and Science of Creative Leadership. Thanks so much.